Yo, what's going on everyone? Mike Hill, the Wholesaling Titan here. And in today's video, I'm going to be talking about virtual wholesaling. So this is how you can run your business flipping houses completely remotely from the comfort of your home or anywhere really, without ever having to meet with a motivated seller, without ever having to meet with a cash buyer, and without even seeing the property. So we're going to get into all that today, and I'm not only going to show you, the step-by-step, exact process of how to wholesale real estate virtually, but I'm also going to show you why this works. We'll be talking about things like psychology. I'm going to be, in addition to explain the psychology involved, there's just some very specific things you need to communicate in order to make these deals work. And also, as a side note, in my personal business, the vast majority of my deals are done remotely. So even if a property is just, a couple miles or a couple minutes from my house, I typically do not meet with those sellers or buyers or even see the property. So before we get into it, just a quick reminder, please do like, comment, share, subscribe. It really helps the channel out a great deal, and I really do appreciate it. Also, whether you're brand new to wholesaling or maybe you've been at it for a while, but you aren't seeing the results that you want to see, maybe a little bit frustrated, or maybe you have done some deals. You've done some deals, but they're kind of here and there. They're just not consistent. I'm going to invite you to jump on a free one-on-one call with me. We're going to chat for about 45 minutes, and I'll show you how to get your first or next deal done as fast as possible, and then how to do them consistently. So I'll put that link down in the description. So there are just a few spots, by the way, for this each week. They always fill up, so go ahead and grab one quickly. Comes on a first come, first serve basis. So now let's go ahead and talk about some virtual wholesaling. And to start this conversation, start this discussion, I want to touch on a previous video I made called Stop Going on Motivated Seller Appointments. And I made the point that oftentimes your conversion rate will in fact go up when you meet with a truly motivated seller in person. Having that belly-to-belly contact and interaction can oftentimes help you out to build rapport and convert at a higher rate. So I want you to understand that I'm not discouraging you on, going on those in-person appointments. I actually think it can be a very good practice, especially for a lot of my newer students who are just getting a feel for the business, learning what to look for or how to talk to people. So it can be a good thing. And you can make a reasonable argument that, you could potentially be leaving money on the table by not going in person and missing out on certain types of deals. But that being said, I am saying that this is largely a lifestyle choice. There are significant benefits to virtual wholesaling that we'll be exploring throughout this video, especially if you physically live in a market where, maybe the demand isn't particularly strong. So we'll go into all those benefits. I personally prefer to run my business this way. It's just, I find it to be a much better use of my time that affords me significantly more freedom. And it just suits my preferred lifestyle. Like, I've physically sat at a poolside in Las Vegas and closed on 5-figure deals on properties here in Florida. So if that sounds like an option that you'd be interested in implementing in your wholesaling business, well, here is how you do it. So first off, quick definition of virtual wholesaling real estate basically means that you're buying and selling a property remotely without ever having to visit in person. So the only real physical requirements you need are a computer or even a smartphone and an internet connection. Technology has really advanced so far that this has just become a lot easier to accomplish. But it's also much more commonly acceptable. Any type of stigma of doing things remotely or online is very much minimal. I think if anything, COVID in particular showed us how much more open people are to doing things remotely. And even in regard to closing, documents can now be notarized remotely. And as a wholesaler, you don't even need to show up physically to get your check. You just, send over your bank details and you'll get the funds wired to your account. All right, so the first part of the process is to begin with your marketing for motivated sellers and or distressed properties. So you can work the majority of your standard lead generation techniques and just kind of exclude things like, bandit signs or door knocking or driving for dollars. And then based on your budget and your target market, you're just going to pursue leads with techniques like cold calling, RVM, text blasting, direct mail, making offers on listed properties, online marketing, and things like that. Anything that can be done from your computer. And then once you start speaking to motivated sellers, you're going to go through your script to ensure that there's potential for a wholesale deal. All right, so meaning that your seller is motivated to accept a quick cash sale in exchange for giving you a discounted price on the property. It's really important that you have your scripts and your messaging down. I mean, this is crucial. You have to understand, the seller's motivation, what their timeline is for selling. You have to ensure that they have equity in the property. You want to be building up rapport. So you really have to know and practice these things. If you don't have a good script, by the way, or a good understanding of these questions, or don't know how to form a solid pitch, what you offer, you can grab a copy of my scripts at www.wholesalingScripts.com. So now within your line of questioning, you're going to get to a point where you'll be asking about the condition of the property. And remember, when you're asking sellers these questions, the majority of sellers have a tendency to kind of minimize or underestimate or downplay the degree to which a property needs repairs. So based on what they tell you about the condition of the property, your next step is to get the seller to give you their asking price. Now, it's pretty common for a seller to respond by asking you to give a price first. To say, well, you contacted me, you tell me what you're going to offer. And you really have to know how to respond in a way that isn't confrontational, but still gets them to at least give you an idea, like a ballpark figure of what they're looking for, just to ensure that you guys are on the same page and there's potential for a win-win situation to be made. Again, if you don't know how to do this, I do give you my exact scripts on a few different conversation loops you can use to get them to give you their price in my Overcoming Objections ebook. Now, that does come with wholesaling scripts, and you can also find them on my website at wholesalingmike.com. So next, once you have an idea of at least that ballpark figure of what the seller is looking for, you want to then ask them to send you pictures of the property as well as a video walkthrough. And while this might sound like, additional effort, additional work on the seller's part, a lot of people might think, well, why would they do that? And you might be even hesitant to ask, why they would go through all that trouble. Most motivated sellers are not only highly likely to comply, but they're happy to do so. Because what this does, it frames you as a more legitimate buyer. I mean, think about this, right? And think about it from the seller's perspective. A lot of sellers these days, and I think the general population, like people in general, are hypersensitive to like any type of fraud or to potential scams. And a lot of sellers are also not familiar with working with, wholesalers or working with investors. And so this idea of purchasing a property or receiving an offer, especially sight unseen, is very foreign for them and potentially even a red flag in their mind. So, you're already asking questions, you're already building rapport, but by also asking for photos and for video, and again, by asking for those things, you're establishing yourself as a serious investor. You're doing your due diligence, you're asking the good questions, you're not just taking their word for it, and you're showing real interest in this property. Right, so that's why they're more likely to go along with you. And then the next step is going to be to take all of that information that the seller has given you and present them with an offer. And just to be clear, I define an offer as a written, signed contract. So you can go ahead and send that over to them. Now, the offer you make is going to include an inspection contingency, which is pretty standard with any purchase and sales agreement. And this acts as a safety precaution and an exit strategy for you, but during your inspection period, because during your inspection period, you have the right to renegotiate the terms of your agreement, including, but not limited to, your sales price. And you can also cancel your contract without any penalties, any repercussions, if something just doesn't work for you. But think about why this works, okay? And how this really translates in the mind of the seller. Because you're essentially saying to your seller, okay, look, based on what you've told me about this property, in your own words, you said the property needs X amount of work, needs a new roof, needs a new bath, whatever, right? So based on what you've said, I'm willing to make an offer of, let's call it $100,000. However, I just need to confirm those details. Again, I'm doing my due diligence here. So I have an inspection period of X days that's going to be in your contract. So let's call it 7 days, where I'm just going to come by or have somebody come by and just confirm that the property is as you say it is, right? Everything you've told me, everything we've talked about is basically legit. And as long as everything is how you've described it to me, then we'll go ahead and move forward with the deal. Now, again, this is going to make a lot of sense in the mind of the seller because, it's a reasonable ask. And it makes sense to them now how you can do this offer sight unseen. They still feel as if their problem is being solved, but you've also set that expectation that someone will need to come and they will need to do a walkthrough. And you've also set the expectation that you may or may not need to make some adjustments to the offer. And again, remember that for most people, this idea of buying a property sight unseen, by just taking the seller's word for it, it is a really foreign idea, can be seen as a red flag. I want to stress that, keep stressing that. And, it could sound like a potential scam. So this really does work in your favor for multiple different reasons. And I'm going to expand on that. We'll go a little bit deeper on that idea in just a minute. But before I do, I just want to remind you guys that this is why I always say, yes, you should know your numbers. You should know how to run your comps. You should know how to run your analysis based on different types of investment strategies. And then you do want to do your best to come up with a max allowable offer that makes sense. However, you also need to realize this is not an exact science, and you really just need to focus on being in the ballpark of a good offer. Remember, buyers buy for different reasons. And at the end of the day, things like ARV, that value, or repair costs, they can be far, far more subjective than you think. And you're ultimately not the one purchasing the property, your cash buyer is. So that's going to go ahead and lead us into the next step here, which is going to be advertising the property to cash buyers. So you can go ahead and email blast the property, text it out to your existing list if you have one. You can put your ads up, put ads up on places like Facebook. And I have a whole series of videos on finding cash buyers and building up your buyers list. So I won't go too deep into that on this video, but what you're going to do is you're then going to use the pictures and the videos that you receive from the seller, and you're going to show those to your buyers. You're going to use those to advertise the properties. And in some cases, if you have really, really good pictures and a good video walkthrough, and of course the numbers make sense, some buyers will actually purchase the property sight unseen. So, don't be afraid to ask for more or for better quality, pictures and or video. So next, right, you're going to start getting some calls, some emails and inquiries about the property. And remember, the seller is already expecting that someone or a few people, be it, inspectors or contractors or your partner, etc., that they're going to be coming to see the property. But, you can't just send a bunch of random people over to the house. So what you need to do next, and you should always be doing this, but what you want to do is start screening potential buyers just to ensure that they're not tire kickers, that they're not realtors, that they're not someone who just attended a wealth building seminar, but they have no clue what they're doing, or, that they aren't other wholesalers, which is actually very common. You want to make sure that they're serious buyers who are ready, willing, and able to purchase with cash. So I actually have a list of questions that you need to ask to ensure that they're legit, that they meet your criteria. And in fact, when I talk about building your buyers list, one thing I'll mention very quickly is that I always recommend that you start by targeting people who already have a history of buying with cash. Even the FBI, they teach that the best indicator of future behavior is past behavior. So again, that's a whole nother video. I won't go deep on that here, but just know you can find these types of buyers through the public record, as well as different, there are different resources and software out there that do this very effectively. So the next thing you need to do is just make sure that your buyers are agreeable to all your terms and conditions, as well as any contingencies in the contract. Just having clear communication here is key. So for example, you might say to your buyer, listen, if the property is as I've presented it to you here, right? So you're referencing your rough estimates, your description of the property, the pictures that you sent over. Are you ready, willing, and able to pay this price, whatever your asking price is, put down an earnest money deposit of, $10,000 or $5,000 or whatever your EMD requirement is? Are you willing and ready and able to sign a contract with a 0-day inspection period? And can you close within 2 weeks? A wholesaler, for example, is very, very unlikely to agree to those terms, 0-day inspection and all that non-refundable deposit. You can also do things like ask for their proof of funds. And also, if you have personal experience with a buyer who's bought from you before, then those buyers would obviously have preferred status. So once you narrow those buyers down, you can then make arrangements to go ahead and do your showing. So now the buyer is going to go to the property and they're going to do their walkthrough and do their inspection. So at this point, a very common question I get is, well, Mike, what if the buyer and seller try to go behind my back and cut me out of the deal because, you're not there, right? So, or something to that effect. And so the first thing I'll say about that is, yes, this is possible. It could potentially happen. There is always a risk, and there's a risk in all business, in any business. So there's risk that things might not work out. But in my view, that is like the equivalent of saying, I'm going to open a retail store where I've run the numbers, I've got a fantastic product, the ROI is there, or maybe I'm even opening a grocery store, but I've checked the margins work, there's profit there. A majority of people, they're going to come into the store, the vast majority, they're going to buy my products. They're going to give me money. I'm going to make a profit, but because I know that some people steal, I'm not going to go ahead and open the store. Like, it just doesn't make any sense to me, right? You're focusing on that small minority. There will be losses in business. There will be disappointments. Not everything's going to work out. It's just a part of doing business, man. So with that in mind, there are a few things that you can do to discourage this type of unethical behavior. So first, just make sure that you are screening your buyers properly, like we talked about a moment ago. And again, give first dibs to buyers that you've worked with before personally, or those that come from with a recommendation. Someone that you know and trust recommends them, or those who have buying history. Next, you always have the choice to show up to the appointment. Or, if you're very far virtually, you can have someone else go, a partner or a realtor, any type of boots on the grounds that will show up on your behalf. That's an option. And then next, if you've done this properly, remember, you will have an executed purchase agreement with the seller before you do any advertising. You have equitable interest, and that means you are legally the only person who is allowed to purchase that property. So if this is a concern for you, you can then take your contract and go down to your local county courthouse. And in my experience, it's actually not necessary in the vast majority of cases. But let's say, for example, the showing happens and then you just get radio silence from both your seller and the buyer, right? Or maybe the seller calls you and they make an excuse. This is one I've heard a lot. I think I'm just going to hold on to the property for sentimental value. And you feel like maybe they're just going to go with someone else. So in those types of scenarios, you go down to your local courthouse, you file a memorandum of agreement to the property where you're going to record a copy of your contract showing that you have the exclusive rights to buy that property. Now, if at any point the seller tries to sell that property with anyone, with any title company, when they run that title search, your claim to the property will come up and they will not be able to sell it. I mean, essentially, you have a lien that clouds the title. So again, they just can't do the deal. So in that case, you can either force performance. I can guarantee you the seller is going to reach out to you or their title company. And basically you can, again, force performance, make the seller sell to you, or you can agree to release it for a fee. Just say like, $5,000 or something like that. So now let's talk about it from the buyer side. You obviously want to make sure you're dealing with good buyers. We talked about that. And we've talked about the screening process already, but that also means that you have to be showing your value. You want to show that you're a good person to work with, that you're getting good deals. And I guess the way I put this is you have to make sure they view the relationship with you like that kid story of the goose with the golden egg, where, instead of trying to screw you on one deal to maximize profit just one time, they know that if they're good to you, that you can keep bringing them more and more deals, for a lifetime, and ultimately make them just a hell of a lot more money in the long term. Also, business is business. We all know that, but you will start to develop relationships with your buyers that does get personal, again, because you are serving them. And in those cases, they do want you to succeed, right? The next thing you want to do is you want to coach your buyers and advise them on how they are to interact with your sellers, what they're allowed to say, what they aren't allowed to say. I do have some verbiage on my assignment contracts that pertain to this. You can also have them sign agreements saying things like, they won't discuss certain things like purchase price, they won't exchange information, or basically signing the equivalent of an NDA. And, you don't need to do that. It's kind of difficult to enforce, but you might just want to, put that out there. Again, this is more rare than people think, largely because real estate circles are actually pretty tight. If someone screws someone on a deal, it's usually a very short amount of time before other people, in the community, in that circle, know about it. And it's not uncommon for those types of people to just essentially be blackballed. When it has happened in my career, when I've seen it, I've gotten emails from other wholesalers, and they'll have all the other wholesalers in our area. They'll all be copied on it, and it'll just say, "Don't do deals with XYZ buyer. They tried to cut me out of a deal." And so that's how someone could just screw themselves royally. So again, this could happen, but not as common as you might think. So now, we do the showing, and after the showing, you are going to touch base with your buyers, or they're going to give you a call. And you're either going to say, yes, it's a go, let's do the deal, in which case you just send all the documents over to your title company, and you move forward with the deal. Just wait to collect your check or get your wire transfer. Or they're going to say, no, the numbers don't work. And at that point, it's your job. You don't just say, okay, you say, well, why not? And then you want to ask the key question, what number would you buy the property for? And at that point, they're going to tell you why the numbers don't work. They're going to tell you, what things need more work than anticipated, something that they didn't know about. They'll share their repair estimates. They may have pictures for you. And in some cases, they may even have a written inspection report. So you want to kind of dig and ask these questions, get as much detail on everything, and then ask them to send you those things, those resources. And then you want to confirm that if you can get it at their preferred price, that they will commit to the purchase. And then you want to let them know, I can't promise you this price, but I'll go to bat for you. I'll go do the negotiating and let me see what I can do. So this also shows really goodwill. It demonstrates, your commitment to their goals. It builds a really good rapport for the future, and it also justifies any profit that you might make on the deal. So now what you want to do is you want to take all of that intel that your buyer has given you and just regurgitate it to the seller. So, you give the seller a call and you say, listen, I know I said I was going to pay you $100,000 for the property, and we're still very, very interested in doing the deal and making this work. But, based on our inspection findings, we found XYZ issues. And those are, again, the issues that your buyer has brought up to you. And you can even send over any tangible proof. So if they do have an inspection report, maybe from a licensed GC, you can send that over. And remember, this isn't like coming out of nowhere. You're not blindsiding the seller. You've previously set the expectations that you are going to, assess or reassess the property. You and the seller mutually agree to those terms in your contract. And as a matter of fact, I have a video showing an example of a property I did this on. You can see the conversation, the emails going back and forth. So I'll put a link somewhere up here. But the cool thing is that because your buyer has already given you the price that they would pay, you now know exactly where you need to be, right? So let's say the buyer says to me, Mike, I can't pay you the 110 that you are asking for. The most I could do on this is 100,000. Well, now you know where your buyer is, and you know that if you get the property for, let's say, 90,000, you're going to make 10. So, and one thing to understand is it's significantly easier to negotiate once you're already under contract because you're already that deep into the process. Now, I do have a longer video where I talk about the seller's psychology and why it makes sense to do it at that point. But some of the bullet points I like to mention are, one, they've already committed to you. When we make decisions as human beings, our minds will often look for ways to justify that the decisions that we've already made are correct, because no one wants to tell themselves they made a mistake. Two, they've also anticipated the closing. They felt the relief of selling. They've mentally envisioned the sale. They've already made plans contingent on that closing. They've mentally spent the profit. And then the third thing is that, the thought of starting over is painful. Who's to say the same thing won't happen with another buyer? It might take months and months and months. They already have something certain with you. And is it worth the risk to start the process all over for something uncertain? So to summarize this narrative and hopefully make it a little bit, make it make more sense and show you why this strategy works so well, just imagine this, right? The typical way. You go to the property, you physically walk through, you see it, and then you make your offer. So essentially, when you do that walkthrough, you meet the seller in person, you've done your due diligence already. So you do your due diligence, you make the offer, but then you're sending in other people to look at it. The seller is going to be like, well, why are they doing that? That could be seen as a red flag. A seller might also wonder, not only why other people are viewing the property after you've made the offer, but, if you come back later and then you ask for a price reduction, well, now the question is, well, you saw it already. Like, you looked at it, you did your inspection, like, what's changed? And, you can still do deals that way, but just understand the mentality here. They weren't anticipating that. And again, it can potentially be seen as a red flag. So now let's contrast this with the narrative of our current strategy, which means we are speaking with the seller. We're understanding their needs. You are, agreeing to make an offer on this property, but they know it's sight unseen. You've asked for photos, asked for video to validate the information from the seller, things that they've given you. You're looking for proof. And your offer contains mutually agreed upon language that sets the expectations that, one, somebody's going to come and look at the property, or some people are going to come look at the property. And because you haven't seen it yet, there's a more reasonable explanation as to why after the inspection is done, you might need to have, a price reduction, or you need to add some additional contingencies in there. So it's just far more plausible in the mind of a seller. Again, it manages the expectations of all parties involved, and simultaneously allows you to have more certainty. When you go to the buyer and they tell you what they're actually willing to pay after they've seen it. So that's why it tends to work really well, right? So not only is virtual wholesaling something that can be done, but like when you do it this way, your sellers are far more comfortable because you frame the narrative in that way, again, that just makes sense, like just rationally. Again, just a reminder, this is very much a lifestyle choice, but I can tell you guys, it is a great feeling to be able to have control of your time, not have to drive all the time like you're working a job, be able to travel, spend more time at home with your family, just have that true freedom, that control over your time, and then you just see a wire transfer, it show up in your account. So look, if you are interested in finding deals here in Florida and have me sell them for you, I've been building my buyers list since 2012. I would love to JV with you. If you want a systematic approach on how to do your first or next deal as fast as possible, step by step. If you want to know how to do deals every month consistently. If you have general wholesaling questions, or if you're interested in mentoring, I now have payment plans available for mentorship. Be sure to book that free 45-minute call with me using the link down in the description, and I'll get you taken care of. We'll talk about all that stuff. All right. So thanks again for checking out today's video. Really appreciate it, guys. Please make sure you leave any questions that you have in the comments section below. Everyone stay blessed. Please remember to like, comment, share, subscribe. Very, very much appreciated. And I will see you guys in the next video. Peace.